Your phone rings. Unknown number. Your heart rate spikes. Your palms sweat. You stare at it like it's a bomb about to explode. It stops ringing. You exhale. Relief floods your body like you just survived something. And then comes the text. Hey, can we talk? And suddenly, you're calm again. You're in control again. You're you again. If you'd rather eat glass than answer a phone call, congratulations. Your brain isn't broken. It's just wired for a type of communication that the world spent 100 years telling you was less than. But neuroscience is about to prove them spectacularly wrong. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain will make you realize you're not antisocial. You're not rude. You're not avoiding connection. You're actually protecting something most people have completely lost. Here's the truth nobody talks about. Preferring texts over calls doesn't make you disconnected. It doesn't mean you hate people, and it definitely doesn't mean you're too anxious to function. But there is something radically different happening in your brain that makes phone calls feel like psychological warfare, while texting feels like finally being able to breathe. Let's start with what's really happening when your phone rings. Number 1, your brain is in permanent threat assessment mode, and phone calls are ambush attacks. When a phone call comes in, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, treats it like a surprise invasion. You had 0 time to prepare, 0 time to think, 0 time to script your response. You're being forced into real-time performance mode with absolutely no rehearsal. And for people whose brains run on deep processing, this is neurological violence. Psychologists call this high reactive temperament. Your nervous system is wired to need processing time before responding. It's not slowness, it's thoroughness. When someone texts you, your brain gets what it needs. Time to consider, time to edit, time to make sure your words actually match what you're trying to say. Phone calls rip that away. They demand immediate reaction. And your brain, which was designed to think before speaking, goes into panic mode because it's being asked to do something it wasn't built for. Instant response without reflection. Here's what's wild. Studies using fMRI scans show that people who prefer texting have significantly more activity in their prefrontal cortex during communication. That's the part of your brain responsible for planning, analyzing, and executive function. Translation: your brain is working harder to communicate thoughtfully. Phone calls force you to bypass that process entirely. It's like asking a novelist to perform improv comedy. Sure, they can do it, but it's not where their brain does its best work. And the exhaustion you feel after a phone call? That's not weakness. That's your prefrontal cortex screaming because it just ran a marathon it didn't train for. Number 2, phone calls are emotional flooding, and your nervous system can't handle that intensity. Here's something most people don't understand about phone calls. You're not just processing words, you're processing tone, inflection, pauses, breathing patterns, background noise, and the emotional subtext of every single syllable in real time. It's like your brain is running 50 different analysis programs simultaneously, while also trying to formulate responses and manage your own emotional state. It's cognitive overload on steroids. People who prefer texting often have what neuroscientists call sensory processing sensitivity. Your nervous system picks up on subtleties others completely miss. That slight edge in someone's voice. That half-second pause that means they're annoyed. That shift in breathing that signals they're about to say something difficult. You're processing all of it. And it's not a superpower when you're trapped on a phone call you didn't want to take. It's overwhelming. With texting, you control the sensory input. No unexpected voice tones. No awkward silences you have to fill. No auditory information flooding your system faster than you can process it. Just words. Clear, manageable, controllable words. You can read them, think about them, and respond when your nervous system is ready. Phone calls strip away that control and force you into sensory chaos. And then people wonder why you seem stressed during calls. You're not stressed. You're drowning in information you never asked to process. Research from UC Berkeley found that people with high sensory sensitivity experience phone calls as significantly more depleting than in-person conversations. Why? Because phone calls remove all visual context. You can't see facial expressions. You can't read body language. You're trying to extract 100% of the meaning from audio alone, while your brain is screaming for the other 70% of communication data it's missing. Texting doesn't pretend to be full communication. It's honest about what it is. Words without performance. And for your brain, that's not limiting. That's liberating. Number 3, texting is consent. Phone calls are intrusion. Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. Phone calls are a power move. When someone calls you, they're saying, "Stop whatever you're doing right now and give me your undivided attention immediately." They're demanding access to your time, your energy, and your mental space without asking if you're available. It's communication as invasion. Texting is the opposite. It's asynchronous communication, which is a fancy way of saying it respects boundaries. When you text someone, you're saying, "Here's my message. Respond when you're ready." There's no pressure, no demand. No expectation that they drop everything for you right this second. And for people whose brains are wired to protect their energy like it's a limited resource, that difference is everything. This isn't antisocial behavior. This is understanding that communication should be collaborative, not coercive. Phone calls operate on the assumption that your time is always available, that you're always in the right headspace to talk, that you never need warning before shifting into conversation mode. People who prefer texting reject that assumption. They're not avoiding connection. They're insisting that connection should be consensual. That it should happen when both people are actually ready for it, not just when one person decides to hit dial. And here's what makes this fascinating from a psychological perspective. Studies show that people who prefer texting score significantly higher on autonomy and self-advocacy scales. They're not passively accepting social norms that don't work for them. They're actively choosing communication methods that align with their actual needs. That's not avoidance. That's self-awareness. And honestly, it's something most people never develop. Number 4, your brain runs on depth, not speed. And phone calls are the enemy of depth. Here's something that will make phone calls make sense. Extroverts process thoughts by talking. They literally need to speak out loud to figure out what they think. Conversations help them clarify ideas. Phone calls are perfect for them because talking is their thinking process. You process internally. You need silence to think clearly. You need space to organize your thoughts before sharing them. Phone calls force you into the extroverted processing model, where you're expected to think and speak simultaneously. And your brain hates it. It's like being forced to write an essay out loud in real time while someone watches and judges every word. Texting lets you think first, then communicate. It aligns with how your brain actually works. Neuroscientists at Stanford found that introverted brains have more activity in the frontal lobe, the area associated with internal processing and complex thought. Phone calls interrupt that process. They demand external processing before internal processing is complete. And the result? You sound less articulate on calls than in texts. Not because you're less intelligent, but because your intelligence requires processing time that phone calls refuse to give you. With texting, you can take that time. You can think about what you actually want to say. You can edit out the filler words. You can make sure your message reflects your actual thoughts instead of your panicked real-time approximation of your thoughts. Phone calls force you to communicate at 60% capacity. Texting lets you communicate at 100%. And then people have the audacity to say texting is less meaningful. Less meaningful for who? Not for you. For your brain, texting is where real communication finally becomes possible. And number 5, You're not avoiding intimacy. You're redefining it. Here's the biggest lie society tells about phone calls: that they're more real, more connected, more intimate than texting. But intimacy isn't about format. It's about honesty. It's about vulnerability. It's about saying true things and being truly heard. And for many people, texting creates more space for that than phone calls ever could. Why? Because phone calls come with performance anxiety. You're worried about how you sound, about awkward pauses, about saying something stupid, about the other person judging your tone. All of that anxiety creates distance. It makes you more guarded, not less. Texting removes the performance element. It's just you and your words. No vocal inflections to misinterpret, no pressure to fill silence, no fear that you sound weird, just what you actually want to say. Studies on digital communication found that people report feeling more comfortable sharing vulnerable thoughts via text than via phone call. Not because they're hiding, because they're not distracted by vocal performance. They can focus entirely on the content of what they're saying instead of how they're saying it. That's not shallow. That's depth without distraction. And let's be honest about something else. Some of the most meaningful conversations you've ever had happened over text. Late-night messages that said exactly what needed to be said without the awkwardness of voice. Paragraphs that captured thoughts you could never articulate in real time. Exchanges where you both finally felt truly understood because you had time to find the right words. Phone calls didn't give you that. Texting did. So if you're someone who sees a phone call and feels instant dread, you're not broken. You're not rude. You're not disconnected. You're just wired for communication that values thought over speed, consent over intrusion, and depth over performance. The world spent decades telling you phone calls were superior. Your brain knows better. The next time someone says, "Why don't you just call?" remember this: you're not avoiding connection. You're protecting your ability to connect in a way that actually works for how your brain processes information, respects your energy, and honors your need for communication that feels collaborative instead of coercive. So tell me, are you team "I'll text you back" or team "I actually like phone calls"? Drop it in the comments. Let's find our people. And if this made you feel seen, hit subscribe. The next video dives into why some people need 3 days to recover from a single social event, and why that's not weakness. It's neuroscience. Click it. You'll finally understand why you are the way you are.